Today, we're going to tackle a topic that's, well, it's delicate, but it's also incredibly important. And we're going to look at it through the lens of a theory that's over a century old. But you're going to see it's shockingly relevant. It's a theory all about how an act we think of as the most personal thing imaginable is, in fact, deeply social. So let's just jump right in with the big, kind of provocative question at the heart of all this. It comes from a sociologist, a real pioneer named Émile Durkheim, and he asked, what if we've been looking in all the wrong places? What if, to really understand suicide, we have to stop focusing on the individual and start looking at the society around them?
So how in the world did he even begin to prove something that radical? Well, he basically became a social detective. He did what any good scientist would do. He ignored all the popular theories of his time, things like madness, personal despair, even the weather, and just looked at the cold, hard data.
And as he started sifting through all these statistics, he found something weird, a pattern. He saw that suicide rates were consistently, systemically higher in Protestant communities than in Catholic ones. And this wasn't just in one country, it was across the board. That kind of consistency, well, it's not a coincidence. It was a clue that some kind of invisible social force was at play. But what could it possibly be? And this is where Durkheim's genius really shines. He figured the answer wasn't in the specific religious doctrines, what was written in the holy books. No, it was in the social structure of those communities, how they were built. So he came up with this brand new approach. He decided to de-zoom from the individual person and instead look at the big picture, the very shape of society itself. Okay, to really get this, we need to wrap our heads around one key idea of his. He called it the social fact. It sounds a little academic, but it's pretty simple. It's the idea that society itself has these powerful currents, ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that exist outside of any one of us. Think about it. The language you speak, the laws you follow, your daily customs. You didn't invent them, right? They were here before you, and they exert this pressure on you, shaping how you live, often without you even noticing. All right, so now we're getting to the real core of the theory. Durkheim argued that our connection to society, the very glue that holds us all together, boils down to two huge invisible forces that are always pushing and pulling on us. The first one is called integration. That's pretty much what it sounds like. It's your sense of belonging, your connection to your family, your friends, your community, a cause, that whole feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. And the second one is regulation. This is the other side of the coin. It's the set of rules, norms, and morals that guide our lives. It's the structure that gives us boundaries and keeps our desires in check. I love this way of thinking about it. It's like a kind of social gravity. Integration and regulation are these forces that keep us all in a stable orbit around society. They keep us connected, but they also keep us on a clear, steady path. But here's the really crucial part. And this is key. The problem isn't these forces themselves. Actually, we need them. The real danger is when they get out of balance, when that social gravity gets too weak or way, way too strong. That's when things break down, and that's when you see these destructive tensions emerge. So, what happens when that balance is broken? Well, this is where Durkheim's framework gets really specific. He identifies 4 distinct types of suicide, and each one is a direct result of one of these imbalances. And this chart lays it out perfectly. Too little integration, you get what he called egoistic suicide. Too much integration, that's altruistic. Too little regulation leads to anomic suicide. And finally, too much regulation leads to fatalistic suicide. Okay, let's unpack what each of these actually means. So first up is egoistic suicide. And I want to be super clear about this name. Egoistic doesn't mean selfish. It's not a judgment. It's a descriptive term. It's about a situation where the individual, the ego, is just not integrated enough. They're disconnected from their social groups. When those social bonds get weak, a person is left totally alone, and the collective purpose that gives life meaning just disappears. This, for Durkheim, explained those statistics. Groups that emphasize the individual more, like Protestants or unmarried people, had weaker social integration. All right. Now let's flip that completely on its head and talk about altruistic suicide. This is the polar opposite. Here, the problem isn't a lack of connection, it's too much connection. The person is so completely absorbed by the group that they practically cease to exist as an individual. Their own life has no value outside of serving the collective. In these extreme cases, suicide can be seen as a duty, even an honor. The classic example is a captain who feels compelled to go down with their ship.
Okay, so that's integration. Now let's look at the other axis, regulation. What happens when there's too little regulation? When the rules that guide society just kind of fall apart? Durkheim had a name for this, anomie. He said it leads to something he called the malady of the infinite. With no rules, no limits on your desires, you're adrift. Anything seems possible, which sounds great, but it means nothing is ever really satisfying. And here's the craziest part. This can happen during a huge economic crash, sure, but it can also happen during a sudden economic boom, when all the old rules about what's possible get thrown out the window.
And that brings us to the last one, fatalistic suicide. Now, this is the flip side of anomie. It's what happens when there's way too much regulation. We're talking about an oppressive, suffocating system. The future is completely blocked off. All hope is just crushed by tyrannical control. Think about the situation of an enslaved person, for example, trapped in a system where there is absolutely no escape, no future. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This is all really interesting, but it's from 1897. How on earth is this relevant to our world today? Well, stick with me, because this is where his theory becomes an incredibly powerful lens for looking at our own lives right now.
Let's take that idea of too little integration. What does that sound like to you? It's what we talk about all the time now, the modern loneliness crisis. He was basically diagnosing it more than a century ago.
And what about anomie, that malady of the infinite? Tell me that doesn't sound exactly like modern burnout. That feeling of anxiety that comes from having a million choices, what to watch, what career to pick, who to be. When the rules get blurry, we all feel a little lost at sea. That's anomie. And that's really the heart of Durkheim's whole insight. He taught us that we have to de-zoom. We have to pull back from just looking at individual psychology and start seeing the bigger social structures at play. He showed us that our personal struggles are so often tied to the health of the society we all share, the world we are building or failing to build together. So, this all leads us to one last big, unavoidable question. A question he leaves us with. If the roots of so much of this suffering are social, then don't the solutions have to be social too? It kind of forces us to think about our collective responsibility, right? To build stronger communities, fairer systems, to build a society where everyone feels like they truly belong.